it is. You can change the future, but you can't change what happened. So that's why I asked her to do that song. This is a very controversial topic. It will make you uncomfortable, and your first reaction will be that this is crazy because I know that my actions are on my own decision. How crazy is this? Well, let me show you a picture of my wife when I told her what I was going to talk about. She said, "You're really not going to say all that stuff, are you?" I said, "Oh, yes, I am, that without question." Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what this is all about. In fact, it's interesting because this idea goes back about 3,000 years. 3,000 years, and there has been lots of opinions about it, but some people, many philosophers, believe what I'm going to tell you is true, but they felt that it was wrong for people, or was troubling for people to believe this because they thought it would affect the way they behave, okay? In fact, Isaac Singer, the great Yiddish writer, he said this, "We must believe in free will. We have no choice." And what he meant by that was, if you believe you don't have free will, it could affect your behavior. So let's talk about what it means to live in a determined world and what free will is. And I'm going to try to summarize. I don't like to put up too many graphics, but I just think this is important because there are two things. This is the hard thing to grasp. You can do what you choose to do, okay, but you cannot choose what you want to do. That is something that comes over you, that overtakes you, okay? Everything, there's a domino effect, okay? Determinism means that everything has a cause, and that cause had a cause, and it goes all the way back. It's interesting, I played pickleball Friday, and I was talking to a friend who I'd never seen before, and I said to him, "When did you start playing pickleball?" He said, "Well, I started playing because I gained a lot of weight." I said, "Why'd you gain weight?" He said, "Well, I started really overeating." I said, "Why'd you start overeating?" He said, "Well, I really got depressed." And I said, "Well, why were you depressed?" He said, "Well, my wife left me." And I said, "Okay, and your wife left you because?" He said, "Well, I was cheating on her, so I decided to end the conversation there." But you can see how far back in theory it goes. Something causes something, which causes something else, okay? And there's no getting around it. Now, the concept of this is called an infinite regress. Can I walk around?
Yeah, it's right there.
Oh, is it? I need to put it on, right? Yep. Where am I hit the? I've never used a microphone before. It's an infinite regress, okay? So this is a great story because there is, Carl Sagan tells the story, but it's been told by many people. I think it goes back hundreds of years. But the premise is that Sagan gave a lecture about astronomy, and a woman came up to him and said, "I think you're wrong about why you think the Earth kind of floats in space." He said, "Well, why do you think the Earth floats in space?" "Well," she said, "because it rests on the back of a turtle." "Rests on the back of a turtle," he said. "Well, that's crazy." He said, "What is the turtle sitting on?" And the woman said, "Well, he's sitting on another turtle." And then Sagan said, "Well, what's that turtle?" She said, "Don't you understand, Dr. Sagan? It's turtles all the way down, okay?" That's what she believed. That's the idea that one thing causes another. It's that infinite thing. Now, let's take a look at a list here. This list, by the way, this list could be 20 times longer, and the next list, and I made it smaller so you didn't have to read it. But that's a list of things that influence you. That you are the totality of everything on that list. You come to every situation with not an infinite number of potential things that could influence you. Okay, you cannot get around that. Those things influence you. And the way to look at it is this. You look at that list, which has hundreds of items, and you think to yourself, okay, I am not controlling that storm. That's a storm, all of those things, because they all affect us. And that's a list of all the experiments, by the way, I neglected to say this. That's a list of all the experiments that scientists have done in the last 50 years to show what affects you, okay? So, that's a storm. But as Sam Harris says, you are not in control of the storm. You are not part of the storm. You are the storm, okay? You are the totality of all of those things. Now, there's lots of ways to look at it. Like this morning for breakfast, okay? For example, I usually have for breakfast a bagel, which I can't catch, okay? Sometimes I have 2 bagels. And once in a while, I have cereal. It's usually not Count Dracula, but that's the cereal. Okay? But this morning, and this is really interesting, this morning, for no reason, I'll talk about what that means, I felt like a couple of eggs. Okay? Why did I feel like a couple of eggs? Why did I want a couple of eggs? I have no idea. It appeared in my consciousness. I wanted something. You can control what you do. I picked the eggs, but you cannot control what you want to do. That is something. Things appear in your consciousness, okay? You cannot create intention. You cannot create desire. It is something that comes over you. Now, I must tell you that right now you're shaking your head and saying, this is silly, I can pick what I want to do. But you have to trust me, truly. By the end of this presentation, I will prove to you that as Unitarians, this is a good thing. So just trust me. Okay, let's go to the next slide, Brett. Okay, I should have put that up after I gave the explanation. What's the proof that all of that, can you take that down, Brett, for 1 second? What's the proof of what I'm trying to say? Well, that long list of things that influence you, one of them on there was hunger. Well, how does hunger affect our behavior? I read this experiment a couple of nights ago, and it was fascinating. They discovered, and it's been replicated, that if you are up in front of a judge who hasn't had lunch yet, you are more apt not to get parole or more years in jail than after he's had lunch. And that term is called, we've heard it, hangry, okay? It's hangry. That's the influence that these things have on you. You can't explain it, you can't understand it, and if you ask the judge about this, what do you think he'd say? Well, that's the craziest thing I ever heard, okay? I would never do that consciously, okay? So that's important. Now, let's talk about a couple of other things. Again, we don't know where thoughts come from. Sometimes people will say to me, but not very often, you say a lot of clever things. Where did that come from? I have no idea. It just pops into my mind. Let's do a little experiment here. Everybody think of a city. Everybody think of a city, any city. Okay, you've all thought of a city? I assume all of you have thought of different cities. Why did that city pop into your mind? Well, there's only 2 explanations. I just want to go back 1 second. Remember, we do things for 2 reasons. And this is important, and we'll go back to the city. You do things because you want to do them, or you do things because you have to do them. If you have to do something, that's not free will. If you want to do something, the next question is, why do you want to do that? Okay? That's the thing you have to understand. And that's what troubles people. Well, if I want to do it, why can't I do it? Well, you can. You have a choice. I want to go to the gym, or I want to play golf. You could say something like, I didn't want to go to the gym, but I had to. I'm not sure what that means. You can only do what you want to do. You are balancing things. Let's say you're in a meeting for the church, and people are giving different points of view, and you're persuaded by one point of view. You didn't create that persuasion. It was evident in your conscious mind. You say, I like that idea. But you can't plan what you're going to think. Try to think about what you're going to think in the next 5 minutes, or try to remember what you were thinking about 5 minutes ago. Thinking is just evidence that your brain is working, okay? Now let's go back to the city. Just out of curiosity, everybody at the same time, at count of 3, yell out the city. 1, 2, 3. Okay, obviously lots of cities, right? Why did you pick that city? Why did you pick that city? Well, you picked that city for one of 2 reasons. You either picked that city because it's a city that you've been thinking about. Why? Because you plan on going there, or you want to go there, okay? That's probably the reason you picked that city. So there's a reason there. There's a cause. There's a cause. Supposing you said to me, well, Dick, I just picked a city, and I don't understand why I picked that city. Well, that's interesting, too, because if you just picked a city at random, things that are at random, okay, you can't explain. Why did you pick that city? Well, there must have been a cause. You cannot do something without a cause. That is very, very important. So think about that for a few minutes. When you talk, what words will come out? Sam Harris makes an interesting, he's giving a lecture on, Sam Harris is a very well-known atheist and determinist, hard determinist. Hard determinist means there's no room for free will at all. No room for free will at all. And if you come to the talk back, Dr. Adams is here. I think Larry disagrees with me about this, but I'm not through making fun of you. But it does scare me that you're taking notes. It does scare me a little bit that you're taking notes. I forgot where I was. What was I saying? What's that?
Sam Harris.
Oh, Sam Harris, yeah. But Sam Harris makes the note that you only have 2 choices. To do what you want to, you have to do. That is what determines all of our actions. Now, the thing to remember, I'll talk about this more toward the end, but remember, if you do something that's caused, you had no choice. Now, you can look back and say, which people do all the time, I should have done that. No, you shouldn't have. Okay? Oh, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have done that. Yes, you should have. Because if you look at the totality of who you are and what your life experiences are, that is exactly what you should have done. But you're not a robot. You're not a robot. Why? Because from that experience, you now have a new experience. And in that list that I put on the board, on that huge list, you understand that everything that you do is a result of your being that total human being. But when you decide to do something, then that becomes part of your experience. It could be, you could have walked in here with having every intention of sitting through my presentation, and then you get a phone call that says there's an emergency at home and you have to leave. That's one of your experiences, and that counts too. But in general speaking, you are the totality of what that was. Once again, you can think of it as a ship if you want. A ship, you're not the captain of the ship, you're not the plumbing, you're not the oxygen, you're not the whatever. You are the whole ship, but you're not the captain of the ship. And again, people are sitting here thinking, well, I know I can make the choices. I know I can. Yes, you think you can because free will is an illusion. But it's a good illusion, which I'll explain to you in just a moment. So keep that in mind. This is not an opportunity to think, well you'll say this, like, why don't I just, what you're saying, Dick, is true, that as everything is determined, that I have no control, why not sit home and just stay in bed and see what happens? Well, if you want to do that, go ahead. But I don't think that's going to work for you. It doesn't work for anybody, okay? If you stayed home and did nothing, you'd have a reason for doing that too. There is a reason, there is a cause for everything. But this, again, can be a good thing, which I'll talk about. So let's talk about that for a little bit. Let me just check if I haven't forgotten something. Yeah, let's put up the next slide, Brett. Okay. How, as Unitarians, why is this important? and I know I'm beating this to death, but I have to say that I know people sit here and think, well, I know I can make decisions. I know that I'm free to make a decision. You are free to make a decision, but you are not free to desire something. You are not here's a good way of looking at it. You are not the agency of those choices. The agency is the life you live. There was a great experiment. I actually read the original, and of course I didn't understand much of it, but the guy was Benjamin Lamette. And in 1980, he did an experiment where he had people. Well, I'll just tell you the result of the experiment because the neurology of it is confusing. But basically, he proved that when for example, everybody raise your right or left hand, whichever you want, right? Okay. He showed in his experiment, and it has been replicated, that before you choose which hand to lift, your neural networks have already made that decision. In other words, before you become aware of it in your conscious mind, have you ever driven along the street and said, well, should I get off at this exit or should I get off at the next exit? Should I turn right or should I turn left? According to Lamette, and several people who have followed this experiment, he hooked up EKGs and EC, all kinds of equipment, that your body recognizes or knows that you're going to turn right or left milliseconds before you actually do that. What does that say about free will, okay? You are at the mercy of what your brain is telling you to do. So can we go back to the other, okay. Now, here as Unitarians, why this is important. And I feel so strongly about this. If people are shaped by conditions, then the ethical response is not blame, it's understanding, okay? You need to understand that when people make a bad decision, in your opinion, they didn't make that decision in the way that you think they did. That was the result of the infinite number of influences on that purpose, okay? Now, I think my friend Larry, who's still writing, and that makes me nervous, here's what I think Dr. Adams thinks, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. We're going to have a talk back, and we'll probably have a big argument. You had a lot of stuff in your thing. Do you have a brain? You don't have a brain? Oh, he does have a brain. This is the brain. There is a theory that's, I think, thousands of years old. It's very interesting. When I read about this, I kind of did some research on it. And some of you may be familiar with this word. It's called the homunculus theory. The homunculus theory is that you can make decisions, because I think Larry will say, well, at some point, let's put it this way. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, but don't heckle me now. I think Dr. Adams would say that if he had all of those, that list of all the things I put on the board, right? That if you had some of the things that a rapist has, that you wouldn't be a rapist because Larry Adams has a soul. There's something inside you other than all of the things that make up a person's behavior. So here's the brain, and I think people like Larry would say, although I'm exaggerating this, that there's a little man, there's a little tiny man inside your brain that is saying, no, it's wrong to be a bank robber. No, it's wrong to be a rapist. No, it's wrong to be a child abuser. So even though all of these characteristics on that long list and more would make you do something, okay, there is no little person inside of you. You could call it a soul. You could call it a soul. But I don't believe that, and Sam Harris and many others don't believe it either. I must tell you, though, that there are many, many, many people, experts, who have different gradations of this. There are hard determinists, there are soft determinists, there are compatibilists, there's all kinds of different people. But for the hard determinists, there is no little person, because the question would be, if there is a little man inside you, who's influencing this little man? Where does he get his cause and effect? he would have, and there we get back to the turtle thing. It's turtles all the way down. If something has to make him change or him do something, what made that happen? What made that happen? What made that happen? So I think we have one more slide about Unitarians. Okay, so this is really important, and I know that the vast majority of you are not going to accept what I'm saying, but I just want you to think about it. Determinism does not conflict with UU values, okay? Because you can be a determinist, and you can have compassion, you can have dignity, you can have justice. And this is the most important thing. I don't like to put things up on the screen, but I think this is important. Imagining how things could have been fuels regret and self-blame. You look back and say, I should not have done that. You had no choice. That doesn't mean that you don't have a choice in the future. You're not a robot in that sense. Well, robots nowadays are a little more sophisticated. But every experience you have adds to that list. For example, if you're trying to understand a person's behavior, not only do you have to understand everything that person is going through, but you have to understand what triggered that response. You have no control over what triggers that response, okay? So let's put up that thing that I gave you for a little homework. Oh, I just want to say one thing. So keep this in mind. You didn't choose your brain. You didn't choose the impulses, again, and you didn't choose what triggered them. So I put up in various, okay, there it is. You could say they or you. You didn't choose your brain, you didn't choose your impulses or their impulses, and they didn't choose the moment that triggered them. That is not to excuse people. This is really important. That is not to excuse people. It's to understand their behavior. I am not a perfect model of this. I don't pretend to be. But as a result of doing a lot of research, I now try, when somebody does something that bothers me, I try to understand that what they did was in a way determined based on the long list. Even if you don't agree with me, do you understand what I'm saying? It's based on that long list of things that happened to you. Was your mother an alcoholic? Were you the first child or the second child? Did you have frontal lobal brain issues? Were you born in this country or another culture? All of those things matter, and all of them brings you to where you are. But once again, just because you could not control, just because it was caused that you felt a certain way, doesn't mean you can't change. You can change, but there is no point, and I think this is so important for all of us, there is no point to look back and say, how often have you said, why did I do it? How many people have said, why did I do that? Well, now you know why, because in a sense you had no control. You were the victim, I don't like the word, but you're the result of everything that had happened to you. And Brett, let's put up the little homework thing I gave, because I want to make a couple of observations about this. Oh, we're doing fine. Okay, let's do the next one. Okay, I'm going to read these real quick for those of you who didn't get the homework. This is an interesting group of 5 situations. A toddler playing with his father's gun killed his babysitter. A 12-year-old victim of physical and emotional abuse took his father's gun and shot a young woman who was teasing him. A man, victim of physical and emotional abuse as a child, killed his cheating girlfriend. A man raised by a great parents shot a woman, this is important, just for the fun of it. A man killed a woman for no reason, but an MRI showed a large tumor on the part of the brain that controls impulses. I think this is such an interesting thought experiment. Based on what I have told you, and we'll talk about this in the talk back, but based on what I've told you so far, what do you think my position might be on this? Anybody have any thoughts? What's the difference? I'm going to phrase it this way. The man that had the brain tumor and the man that did it just for the fun of it. Can anybody guess what my position would be on this? Anybody ever thought what my position would be on this? No difference, right? You're absolutely right. But, and why, Martin?
Because you have said every instance
Exactly. The person who had the brain tumor, we can see the brain tumor. We might even say if they remove it, he's no longer responsible for what he did. I mean, he won't do it again. Well, why do we punish people? We punish people, and we should punish people. By the way, if you think I'm saying that people shouldn't be punished, well, of course they should be punished for a lot of reasons. The two big reasons are it's an example to other people, and the other reason we punish people is that person should be punished and kept away from other people. Okay? But the point is that we punish people. What's that?
I don't believe we should punish people. I believe we should rehabilitate them.
I'm getting to that. I'm getting to that. In a way, there is no point in retributive punishment, okay? Because that really doesn't stop anything. But we also put people away to keep them away from other people and doing the same thing. The question is, what's the purpose of the punishment? And that's what we have to look at. There's no question about that. But Brett, put that thing up again. So, again, the question is, the person who killed that woman just for the fun of it, that's really bizarre. But there's something going on in that person that in a way he is not responsible for. He did not want to be a murderer. Nobody really wants to be a murderer. There's a way of debating that, but basically no one wants to be a murderer. But it's very important to understand that in that situation, that person was no more forced to do that than the guy with the brain tumor. Okay? I'm sorry, Brett, I want to put that up one more time. Let's keep that up for a minute. Okay. Now, let's talk about mitigating circumstances. Would anybody put that toddler in jail? Yes. Who said yes? Oh, no. I have a joke and I won't do Matthew. Okay. Nobody would do that. That child is innocent, okay? Number two, a child who was physical and emotional abuse took his father's gun and shot a young woman who was teasing him. What's the mitigating or culpability there, do you think? What's your opinion? We'll talk more about this later. What should have happened to that 12-year-old? It's very interesting. When Mary Ellen watched old Law and Orders, or SUV, we're always struck by the fact that when they bring in somebody who has committed a sexual crime, that half the time they look at the person's background and they say, well, he was abused too, so let's use that as a mitigating circumstance. The other times, they look at that person and they say, well, he's just a sleazebag, he ought to go to jail. I don't know what makes that difference, but nobody is going to be a child abuser without a whole series of things that made that person, if you want to call him evil, go ahead. Let's see what else. A man raised by great parents shot a woman just for it. That's the one I'm talking about. There's something as wrong with that man as there is with the person who had the brain tumor. Now, there's no way I can convince the world, okay, that I'm making but getting back to what you were going to say, Helen, that person who did that just for the fun of it needs help too. Whether putting him in jail is going to make a difference, I don't know. But the good thing about putting him in jail is we don't want him to kill somebody else for the fun of it. So the question is, what can we do to rehabilitate him? Is that correct? Okay. No, please say nice and loud.
And remove the person from a situation where he can hurt people.
Exactly.
Not necessarily jail.
You got to say it a little louder.
It's not necessarily jail to remove.
Oh, exactly. Absolutely. Okay. Let me end this today by showing. Don't put it up yet, Brett. Is this the last slide? Okay. I want you all to remember. I know you're not going to go away believing what I'm telling you is true. I just wanted to sort of expose you to what I think is true. But here's the thing to keep in mind when somebody does something you don't like. Okay, Brett. That is somebody's life, and that is what you know about it. Does that make sense to everybody? And you need to write it down, Larry, because you might want to talk. Okay. Anyway, thank you very much for listening. I know I haven't convinced anybody of this, but I hope I gave you something to think about. Thank you.